Live from Sunrise, Florida, it's opening night!
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On Chicago Blackhawks podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I want to thank everybody who makes Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Florida Panthers and from the Hockey News. That is Jack Bushman, credentialed member of the PGA Tour, writer for Chicago Hockey Now, and credentialed member of the Chicago Blackhawks media here joining me on today's edition of the show. Today, we are going to be discussing the summer for both teams. We are going to revisit the Seth Jones-Spencer Knight trade from just a week before the trade deadline and how that is panned out for both teams. And then third segment, we are going to discuss what success looks like for each team. But Jack, grateful as always to be collaborating with you on another edition of the show. We did some dynasty talk over the summer, and now we are back here discussing. And then after the Panthers last night getting their rings and just an overall celebration when it comes to all of their success, I'm very excited to now officially drop the puck.
Very excited for the start of the regular season, like you said. Very excited to be back on the show talking Chicago Blackhawks and Florida Panthers hockey with you again. Feels like it was just a couple of days ago that we were having that dynasty discussion. It's kind of crazy how the time flies, but we finally arrived opening night, the first game of the 25-26 NHL season. Excited to break it all down with you, Armando, and finally have some concrete hockey stuff to talk about with game action returning.
Yeah, and one more thing on the rings. The rings look outstanding with the two Stanley Cup championships. The Panther logo from what they have on the side of their sweaters right across, back-to-back on the side, the rat at the bottom, and the Panther, and then the phrase, "We apologize to no one," from what Sam Bennett said during the parade. I actually looked back at the Chicago Blackhawks rings from 2010 to 2015 and just the history of all the cups that they won, even though they went through a drought. And just, I love the fact that it tells such a great story of just the mission. And of course, all the teams that they eliminated along the way, along with clinching their second Stanley Cup on June 17th. But 5 p.m. puck drop from Sunrise, Florida. We've talked a lot off the air about how much we don't like this puck drop with obviously the NHL wanting to put the Rangers and the Penguins in the primetime slot and on the East Coast. And and the thing is, Chicago fans, they had to watch the Cubs all the way till 11 p.m. Eastern, 10 midnight Eastern, 11 p.m. Central, and now having to turn around here for this game. So we got to power through all of this.
Yeah, definitely not an ideal, opening game of the season, being it's Tuesday at 4 p.m. Central Time in Chicago when the puck is expected to be dropped. Of course, there's going to be the banner raising ceremony. There's going to be player introductions. The Blackhawks have actually been, it seems like every other year, Armando, they're on the road for an opposing banner raising ceremony. So we're pretty familiar with how these things tend to go. So I'm expecting it to be a little later of a start than 4 p.m. CT. But regardless, I mean, if this was Saturday or Sunday, I would understand it. But yeah, definitely, I think a little bit of a poor decision by the NHL. It's not like they had to go with 3 games on the opening night, or as you mentioned to me off air, they could have put it on another channel. ESPN does have multiple networks like ESPN2 to utilize for this exact purpose, but I'm gonna make it for the opening puck drop. Fortunately, won't have to be like pulling it up on a side screen at work or anything, but excited to see, this young Blackhawks team in action. And of course, they're getting tested pretty heavily right out of the gate, going up against the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion Panthers, Armando.
Yeah, and that leads us to what we're going to talk about remaining in this first segment, just the overall summer for both of these teams. Yeah, you said it. The Panthers are coming off back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, and it's once again a celebration of just a team that has just been resilient, and also the patience level from ownership of when it comes to building this team, now being in their 11th year of owning the franchise, and then just what they've done in the community, building a new ice facility in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Now it's manifesting on the ice for the Panthers, but it's going to come with some adversity this time around, as they're going to be without Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, and Tomas Nosek, which Alexander Barkov, Bill Zito said that he's going to be off the crutches by next week. He actually received his championship ring. He decided to not go with the crutches, a little bit of a limp there, but still he wants to power through and hopefully make his return. But for the Chicago Blackhawks, interesting summer for them. 3 first-round picks, including trading back into the first round to pick Mason West, who passed for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns this week in high school football. So he's doing the dual sport athlete there. But just picking Anton Frandel in the first round, number 3 overall, which he had to Michigan just this week. But just the how much excitement level now is it for the Blackhawks that they're now starting to build the prospect pool even more?
Yeah, it's really fun to start seeing some of these kids who Kyle Davidson has drafted over the years early in the first round now arriving onto the pro scene, and it's just going to make this Blackhawks team for this season much more entertaining. They'll have much more upside. A lot of the players, a majority of them that Davidson has selected early on, are quality skaters, and that's really been an issue for this Blackhawks team the last few years. Entering the 24-25 season, they were one of the oldest teams in the NHL and did not play with a lot of pace, and it was clear that really stunted their offensive abilities and didn't do Connor Bedard any favors in the early portion of the season as well. So now that those kids are really starting to be at the forefront of what's going on with the NHL roster, definitely is going to make for a more fun team to watch for the Blackhawks, and that's been desperately needed over these last few years when there's been a ton of struggles and not a high offensive output. But you mentioned another strong draft class here in 2025 for the Blackhawks that's just continuing to stockpile an already deep prospect pool. Anton Frandel, not only with the Michigan last week, Armando, he had a hat trick in his following game for Djurgården in the SHL, second youngest player ever in that league to record a hat trick. He's off to a phenomenal start to his season and one of the best leagues outside of the NHL in the entire world. Vaslav Nestrasil, who we took 25th overall, scored a goal in his first appearance with UMass, who is a top 20 ranked team in college hockey this season. And then you referenced Mason West. He's not playing hockey right now, but he's balling out on the gridiron. And I saw someone, I forget who it was off the top of my head, post on social media recently saying the Blackhawks have one of the most interesting prospect pools right now, considering how deep it is, and they have the quarterback position locked up. So I thought that was just a real funny tweet that was made. But Mason West, 6'7", already over 200 pounds as a young 18-year-old kid. I mean, there are so many pieces in this prospect pool, and I love the addition of West and a guy like Vaslav Nestrasil, guys with size who have a ton of upside. Yeah, they're a little bit of wild card projects, but with so many prospects in the pipelines, Kyle Davidson can afford to take some swings, and he certainly has done that in the last couple of NHL drafts, trading back into the first round, taking Mason West. In 2024, they took a guy like Marek Vanacker. So I'm super excited about where the future of this Blackhawks team is heading. And again, like I mentioned right off the jump, we're finally going to see some of those guys all come together on the NHL roster this year, and it should be a lot more fun following this Blackhawks team.
Yeah, and for the Blackhawks, Frank Nazar continuing to be part of the roster. Now you're going to get a full season of Artev Leshinov there, and even Kevin Korchinski is going to be. Daily Faceoff doesn't have him right now on the roster, but he's going to be an extra defense piece for the Chicago Blackhawks that they're hoping to build around. So that we're starting to see slowly but surely this Blackhawks team put together everything. And yeah, there's a lot of the stories about the Connor Bedard and the comparisons to Macklin Celebrini, but I feel like because of the exposure and how much time that the Blackhawks are on TV versus the Sharks, that's why people are so down on Connor Bedard versus Macklin Celebrini. It doesn't help that he didn't go to the World Championships this time around, which adds to that narrative. But I think it's the exposure that has created so much more criticism than necessary.
I definitely agree, Armando. And I really do think that narrative around not only Bedard, but the Blackhawks is going to change this year. Last year, the San Jose Sharks, the worst team in hockey, they were the fun bunch. I think that's going to be the narrative around the Blackhawks this year because, again, the speed and the young players that are here, you referenced Frank Nazar, who I legitimately think the world of. Connor Bedard is going to be the leading scorer and the offensive playmaker for the Blackhawks of the future. Frank Nazar is going to be the heart and soul of this team. And Sam Rinzel on the blue line, you mentioned Artem Levshinov. Wyatt Kaiser is super young. There's a lot of intriguing young pieces on this Blackhawks team. And for every position group, we'll get there in just a second with the goaltenders, I know, there really is just a different focus in terms of what's happening right now is actually meaningful for the future as well. Whereas we've been kind of going through just some placeholder seasons these last couple of years. Now every single position group is meaningful for the future. And it's cool that they're all now on the scene all together.
Yeah. And we'll see if they could at least raise their floor coming into this season, as this is still a season of expectation for building for future years for them. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to revisit a big trade that these two teams made back on March 1st between the Florida Panthers and the Chicago Blackhawks, and how the two pieces have been meshing with their new squads. We're talking the Seth Jones and Spencer Knight trade. We're going to discuss that all next here on this crossover edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And the NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Once again, go to the FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today, and get started. Segment 2 here on this Tuesday, October 7th edition of this crossover edition between Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you once again for making both of our podcasts your first listen of the day. So let's revisit a big trade for the Florida Panthers and the Chicago Blackhawks, which, by the way, during Spencer Knight's time with the Florida Panthers, during the national anthem, the crowd loves to chant Knight during the anthem, and they even kept doing it after he was gone. And you know what? It's going to be socially acceptable to do it as a way of, we miss you, we hope you're doing well. But after that, there's no excuses for Panther fans to keep doing it. I'm going to get tired of it after tonight. This is the first time that these two teams will be facing their these two guys, in Seth Jones and Spencer Knight, facing off against their former clubs. And I just remember how it all happened on that Saturday, March 1st. I did not watch the Panthers Flames games live. I actually watched it on demand hours later. And then in the middle of me watching on demand, that's when I found out about the Jones Spencer Knight trade. And I'm just thinking, okay, everything of my content is going to be talking about the trade instead of breaking down a hockey game from that past Saturday, where the Panthers did lose to Dan Vladar and the Calgary Flames that afternoon. It was a 3 p.m. Start time for the Panthers. But I'm so happy for Spencer Knight, because he has a path. Well, he is the projected starter for the Chicago Blackhawks here, and now he did earn a contract extension, just under $6 million a year, which, with the rising cap, that is exceptional for a goalie that is still hasn't had 100 starts yet. Prior to the trade, he had start number 80, which made him no longer waivers exempt. So how awesome is it now that there is a path for Spencer Knight for the Chicago Blackhawks, and now he's expected to get the bulk of the starts?
Yeah, he's now the number one goalie of the future here in Chicago. And obviously, Panthers had high hopes for him when they selected him as early as they did in the 2019 NHL draft, I believe it was. But
Yep.
Sergei Bobrovsky rising to the occasion and becoming just such a cornerstone for this franchise. Obviously, kind of blockaded Spencer Knight's path to being the starter there. Now he finally gets that opportunity for the first time in his career here in Chicago. And you mentioned the deal that he signed over the summer, Armando. I thought it was another excellent contract given out by Kyle Davidson in a similar path to Frank Nazar, what he signed early on in the summer, and Alex Vlasic back in the spring of 2024. Just contracts that in a couple of years down the road can really look like absolute bargains, even though some of these guys are still a little bit of an unproven commodity, right? You mentioned Spencer Knight with the Panthers was mostly used as a backup, hasn't even appeared or made 100 starts in his career. So there is a little bit of, I don't want to say guesswork, but Spencer Knight has the pedigree and has the talent, but we've still never seen him operate as a number one goaltender. So I guess that's where you could see like the risk of the contract per se, but I think there's no denying that it's going to wind up being a phenomenal deal. And I'm very excited to see what Spencer Knight has in store during the 25-26 campaign. I know it's a very inexperienced defensive unit in front of him. He's probably going to be facing a lot of rubber, which he wasn't too familiar with doing during his time with the Panthers. But I thought he held up really well at the end of the 24-25 season. Had a couple of games where kept the Blackhawks alive with his effort in between the pipes and shown that he has the capability of stealing a game for you. And I think that is going to be big in helping the Blackhawks take a step as a young group here this season, knowing that they have a trusted backstop mate in Spencer Knight. Like the rest of the team, there's going to be learning curves. I'm sure there's going to be hiccups and bumps in the road, but he undoubtedly presents a different upside than any goaltender the Blackhawks have in the organization. Arvid Soderblom, really believe he's going to be an NHL backup. Drew Commesso is a prospect that I've been super high on since the Hawks selected him in the second round of 2020, but he doesn't have the upside that Spencer Knight possesses. So it just gives the Blackhawks a different level of goaltender of the future moving forward. And like you said, now finally presents Spencer Knight with that number one starting goaltender opportunity. That's how he's going to be utilized by the Blackhawks all throughout this upcoming season.
Yeah, and the mindset for the Panthers was that you're just not going to carry $14.5 million in total goaltending money that could strap you and hurt you in different areas of the ice, because the Panthers, they were still already committing a whole bunch of money to their forwards. Now they have shifted a little bit of that balance a little bit to their defense. I mean, trading for Seth Jones, it was only a $2.5 million difference between shifting Spencer's contract out and then adding him, which the Blackhawks still have to retain $2.5 million of that salary. And then that also gave them an avenue for extending Nico Mikla, although his new deal doesn't start until after both Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight's contracts are up. So you don't have to worry about also the question about after both of their contracts expire, saying, okay, Spencer was going to be an RFA, Bob was going to be a UFA, and then because he's won back-to-back cups, Bob still believes that he can play hockey even after this season. So that's going to be the conversation of just thinking, okay, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes all the way up to June 30th, and then Sergei Bobrovsky signs maybe a 1 or 2 year deal at less than what he was making, and then there's still a lot of promise with Daniil Tarasov, a guy that is from the same exact hometown as Bobrovsky. So that's another great story about what they have in goal. But Seth Jones, my goodness, a guy who was traded to Chicago, which that was under a different regime in Stan Bowman. And it was promised that they were going to go after for one more time before they're having to press the reset button. And then he's kind of stuck there, and then making his voice heard, getting the trade to the Florida Panthers. One of his preferences was Florida or Dallas. And then the outstanding Game 7 that Seth Jones had, the Game 7 against the Leafs, those are not done without the two acquisitions that Bill Zito did at the trade deadline with Seth Jones and Brad Marchand, which you were with me in person in Florida when that Brad Marchand trade went down, which it's incredible of how Seth Jones is able to just man the power play, ballot it out in his own zone, and just with his size, his ability to protect the puck. And the fact is, now the Panthers going into this season, they have all three pairs have at least one right-handed shot from the first pair to the third, now adding Jeff Petrie to the mix. So a full training camp for Seth Jones here because now he's getting a full season. I even said, because Seth Jones got invited to Team USA orientation camp, and I wonder if this is gonna up his numbers on the power play. I think that his reputation is in a way saved, and I think that he has a big chance to challenge for the Norris Trophy. I don't think he'll win it, but I do think he has a good chance to challenge for it.
Yeah, the narrative, in my opinion, around Seth Jones in Chicago was always a little bit unfair. It's just so hard to gauge, especially a more so offensive-minded defenseman on a really bad hockey team who's playing, 23, 24 minutes a night. But it didn't surprise me whatsoever, Armando, as someone who's always somewhat defended Seth Jones on Locked On Blackhawks throughout the years of his up and down tenure with Chicago. I was not surprised whatsoever that he had the performance that he did when it mattered the most for Florida in the postseason. And I mean, playing over 25 minutes a game on the back end, those are the things that Seth Jones is capable of doing. 4 goals, 5 assists, really sound performance that didn't surprise me at all. And I was super happy to go and see him lift the Stanley Cup. I don't know if I would quite put him in that, personally, that Norris Trophy level, but I think he's going to be back to being a little bit underappreciated as opposed to overrated. That was kind of the narrative around Seth always in Chicago. Now I think he's going to be a little bit more of an underappreciated part of what this Florida Panthers are building on the defensive side of things. But just want to go back real quick to what a hectic week that was for me and you at the beginning of March. The Blackhawks trade Seth Jones for Spencer Knight. Then I go and visit you down in Florida a couple days later. Then I'm with you when the Brad Marchand trade news breaks. It was a pretty crazy couple of weeks there, but glad we got to do that because it's pretty funny how these teams just continue to have these connections with one another. Just made sense that I was down in Florida during that time, my friend.
It was absolutely bonkers. And then we had our in-person trade deadline special. And thankfully, we had a lot to talk about still when it came to the trade, because it was less than a week of it being fresh of that trade. And if you guys want to go back, you'll see the Seth Jones Blackhawks jersey in the background, along with the Florida Panthers jersey that we did for that show. And with the Panthers have a lot of injuries right now on their roster for opening night. And I remember texting you right away that the pick that the Panthers sent to Chicago in the Seth Jones trade, it's unprotected for 2026. So Chicago Blackhawks fans are going to have to root against the Panthers this coming season, as it's still going to be difficult to navigate, but it makes the Florida Panthers regular season, the most interesting it's been in quite a while. So that is going to give us an opportunity to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss opening night rosters for the Florida Panthers and the Chicago Blackhawks and what success looks like for each team. We'll discuss that next here on this crossover edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks.
Real quick, before we get there, though, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone like yesterday? How can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, it's easy. Just use Indeed. Because when it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other websites, because Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. So skip all of those unnecessary questions and steps. And now you can speed up your hiring process and also get a $75 sponsored job credit along with it. All you got to do is go to Indeed.com/lockedon and make sure to support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Are you hiring? Then Indeed is all you need.
Segment number 3 here on this crossover edition of Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you once again for making Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks your first listen of the day. So opening night rosters have been released. It's funny. Right before recording, there was 4 teams that had not submitted their opening night rosters to Puckpedia. In the middle of this recording, the Panthers actually officially submitted theirs, as Noah Gregor has signed a 1-year contract, a 2-way deal, after being on a PTO worth $775K. Alexander Barkov is going to be on LTIR to start the season, along with Matthew Tkachuk and Tomas Nosek. So, and looks like that Tyler Mott is going to be released from his PTO. Still questions on whether they are going to be sending Mackie Samoskevich down to the minors at least temporarily, because he is waiver exempt due to the numbers there for the Panthers. So that's what Puckpedia at least put out there. So it's still something to keep an eye out. The projected lines don't have them currently there, as the Panthers are just finishing an optional skate just now from Fort Lauderdale. So Cole Schwent is going to be part of the opening night roster as well for the Cats. And their current cap space with all the LTIR stuff is $2.26 million and a total cap of 101.6. So, and while the Chicago Blackhawks, they're right at the bottom of total salary spent. And here's the thing for Chicago. They kind of spent a little bit last year going to complement Connor Bedard, the Tyler Bertuzzis, the Nick Folignos of the world. They didn't really do that this time around for their offseason. So the mission from what at least the impression that I'm getting is internal development, and I think that's going to be a big deal right before Kyle Davidson is ready to spend big, because Connor Bedard's going to be an RFA. It's going to be strange seeing an extension for a number one overall pick immediately being $9 million in this new salary cap era, which that's what I'm going to expect Connor Bedard to make. But how are you looking at this season and and the internal development that they're banking on?
Yeah, that's clearly the priority, and they do feel like now they had enough pieces that were ready to come up to the NHL that I don't think Kyle Davidson wanted to necessarily like block anyone's path or anything. But I do still feel a little bit disappointed that the best top six ad that he went out and got this summer was Andre Burakovsky, who's been pretty putrid in his last couple of seasons with the Seattle Kraken. I understand Mitch Marner was never really going to be a fit with what he was wanting to command in the timeline of the Blackhawks rebuild. That didn't really make a lot of sense. And I know, obviously, Brock Besser went back to Vancouver and took less for whatever reason. It was just kind of a weird year with free agents in general. It seemed like everyone was kind of taking less to stay back home, except for a few guys. Nikolai Ehlers maybe was someone the Blackhawks could have made a run at. I still feel like it's the third year in a row. The first two were a little bit more understandable because of where the Blackhawks were at in their rebuild. But this is kind of the third year in a row where Connor Bedard really doesn't have any true top line help alongside him. I will say he obviously established really good chemistry along with Ryan Donato last year. That led to Donato having by far the best season of his entire career, posting career highs all across the board offensively. But still, Donato and Burakovsky as Bedard's top line mates, not exactly good enough in my opinion. However, I do think, the addition of Frank Nazar on the second line, and he's going to be playing a ton on the top power play unit. Sam Renzel is going to be on that top man advantage as well. There are some more pieces. And again, like I alluded to earlier, some speedier options. Burakovsky, the one thing he does really do is move well for a player of his side. Those things will help raise the bar for Connor Bedard offensively, but it's still going to be a challenge because, Donato, Burakovsky, not true top liners. It's not a extremely deep roster in terms of the veterans, and the Hawks are going to be relying a lot on their young players, especially on the blue line. So in terms of consistency, it's going to be tough for the Blackhawks night in and night out, but I do still think this is, again, a more capable bunch. They're going to have a higher upside, and because of the speed they have, they're going to be scrappy on both sides of the puck. That's going to make their defensive capabilities even better. So I'm still expecting it to be a year where the Blackhawks finish 8th out of 8 teams in a Central Division. That's super deep, but I do think they're going to win 30 games and reach 70 points for the first time since 2020, which is pretty sad to say. But it's because the kids are now on the scene and they're going to be the ones leading the charge. They should be the priority. They are. And I like that. That's what Kyle Davidson has done with the roster. But like I said, the one thing I would probably nitpick is we could have gone and gotten a legitimate top liner probably instead of Andre Burakovsky.
Yeah, and Burakovsky being traded and then bought out immediately, and then the Blackhawks signing him, which, hey, he's a Stanley Cup champion. So maybe that's two-time Stanley Cup champion. So that's also that could be something helpful for the Blackhawks there. And I remember we were talking about Ryan Donato. Was that an outlier season from what he had last year? So is it repeatable for the Chicago Blackhawks? But the Panthers actually have released their opening night roster from their PR department. They do have Mackie Samoskevich in, so he won't be sent down because of the new rules of the paper transaction, which you have to play an actual AHL game. They didn't want to risk that, so that's what that tells me for these two teams. But it's going to be interesting for the Florida Panthers here on just how they get through this season, because their lines, from what they were putting out in practice, they originally had the Marchand, Luostarinen, Lundell line together, but they actually put Marchand up with Sam Bennett. So it's going to be 2/3 of the Rats of the Florida Panthers being together. So and they also reunited Sam Reinhart with Luostarinen and Lundell, which was a line that was outstanding during the 2023 Stanley Cup run, which all that really started in Game 2 for the Panthers in 2023, for how they were able to just shift the tides for the Panthers in their first run before losing to the Vegas Golden Knights. So I'm really interested to see the bottom six is still a big question mark, as now you're going to be relying on the likes of Luke Cunnin as one of your centers. Evan Rodriguez has shifted from wing to center as well. So the Panthers are going to have to be navigating how they are going to fill in the roster during the regular season, and we won't see that until like January, February. And who knows if Alexander Barkov is going to be back, because there's also the changes to regular season IR and season-ending IR, which the Panthers have not signed off on. That Barkov hasn't neither. So it's going to come to a decision there, and I'm interested to see just because that fourth line that they had of Nosek, Gadjevich, and Greer, they didn't give up a 5-on-5 goal in the Stanley Cup playoffs until the Stanley Cup final. So that was a big strength of theirs during their postseason run. Can it continue even without Tomas Nosek being in the mix? Can they limit the goals against? Because the Panthers, their style of play, low scoring, low event games, shot suppression, and then keeping the puck in the zone with their aggressive forecheck, which the Panthers are suffocating, love to suffocate other teams. So I'm very confident in the top six. It's just the bottom six is the one where I'm just like, hopefully not having to like hang on to our butts constantly.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. And it, doesn't help, obviously, with two key pieces being out for a long term. You have to have a couple guys move up in the lineup a little bit. As far as though, like, my outlook on the Florida Panthers, while obviously that is an unprotected first round pick that has come back to Chicago, I don't think it's going to really matter in the unprotected conversation. I am hopeful that the Blackhawks would be able to scrape maybe like an 18th, 19th, 20th pick out of Florida for the 2026 NHL draft, even though, they have a couple, like I just said, Matthew Tkachuk, Alexander Barkov out. You mentioned Tomas Nosek as well. And there's some question marks around the bottom six. There's still enough veteran heavy pieces that have been here a while for this to not turn into like an absolute disaster or anything. But it is going to be fascinating, like you mentioned, how the Panthers kind of dictate that salary cap situation now that you can't just finesse the league and put a guy on LTIR and then have him come back in the Stanley Cup playoffs, a la the 2015 Blackhawks, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Vegas Golden Knights. I think the league had finally seen enough. But like you mentioned, that is going to create a fascinating discussion around the Panthers financially. And then also, just because they are without those two key pieces, makes the regular season maybe a little bit more nerve-wracking for the fans.
Yeah, no doubt. And 18th pick for the Blackhawks with the Panthers pick, that still has the Panthers in the playoffs, which I still believe that the Panthers have a truly high floor. So I'm not ready to say three-peat as of right now. I'll reevaluate that a little later. I can't necessarily say when it will be, but I do believe that success for the Florida Panthers this season, as currently constructed, is at least winning a round or two as of right now. And maybe we could change that conversation later on down the line. So I still expect the Panthers to be extremely competitive in an Atlantic division, which I, as of right now, have them third projected, just like last year. But for Chicago, is being out of the top 5, would you say successful season for Chicago?
I don't think you can really, man, it's tough to put it in wins and losses just with this such an inexperienced group still. A successful year for the Blackhawks will just be the young kids continuing to take a step, and there's a lot more of them, like I've talked about. Connor Bedard, I think he's poised to have his best NHL season. If he does, that's a successful year for the Blackhawks. If Frank Nazar takes strides in his own game and they solidify a true 1-2 punch down the middle that the Blackhawks have been missing for a decade, that's a successful year for the Blackhawks. If Sam Rinzel stays healthy on the back end and plays a top pairing role through the entirety of the season, that's a successful year for the Blackhawks. If Spencer Knight, cements himself as a legitimate number 1 goaltender, like we've expected him to become, but now is finally getting this opportunity, that's a successful year for the Blackhawks. So I know it's probably frustrating to some listeners and fans to not give a specific win total or a number, but I just think it's still so early in this, I don't want to say rebuild, but this youth movement now, because the Blackhawks, they're still going to have high draft picks, but it's now, again, about the young players who are on the scene, and there's going to be more of them coming from Rockford, guys who are in their first pro season that are just starting the year in the AHL. Anton Frondel could be coming over after his year ends in the SHL. Roman Kanserov, who's been one of the best U22 players in all of the KHL early on the season, he's in the final year of his deal over at Russia. So it's really just all going to be about more of these kids coming together and establishing a culture that's different from what it's been over these last couple of years. And I keep using that word fun, not only because I do think it's going to be a more fun Blackhawks team, and having fun will truly kind of be a success for the Blackhawks this year because there hasn't been a lot of fun to be had, but it's also a term that Frank Nazar has used in the locker room. I think these guys are truly understanding, yes, they're still in the early stages, but there's a whole lot of talent here, and it kind of feels like something special is really starting to brew. So I think if these young players just take those strides and also come together to make a more competitive team night in and night out as much as they can, I'll be a happy Blackhawks fan at the end of the 25-26 campaign, Armando.
Yeah, and hey, if they're outside of the top 5 in lottery odds and they still end up getting Gavin McKenna, no one will complain about this season for sure. That'd be something, and I'm sure that there will be some fan bases who will be angry about that. That's for sure. So yeah, Jack,
give me those tears. Give me those tears. They're so delicious.
But Jack, thank you so much for joining me on this crossover of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Blackhawks. If you guys want to follow Jack, you can follow him on X at Jack Bushman 2, his Strictly Blackhawks page at Talkin' Hockey, and his work at Chicago Hockey Now. And you'll see him in the press box this season for the Blackhawks. And for anyone on the Blackhawks feed, you can follow me on X at Monoman12, follow the show account at LO_FLA Panthers, and anywhere you listen to podcasts, and some of my work at the Hockey News. But Jack, thank you so much, and I will see you very soon, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Armando. Always a fun time when we get to talk hockey together.
Absolutely.